I've seen thousands of startups come up over the years, but only a few of them have what it takes to win and succeed. So today I'm going to share the key concepts of what I've learned of building startups in the past 30 years and take you from where you are now to thinking like a seasoned founder so you can increase your chances of success. These concepts helped me build one company. Vivino is the world's largest wine app and community with 70 million users all over the world, and we've raised over $100 million. They're relevant for almost every founder and could save you years of making the same mistakes. And yes, number one is what everyone does who builds a successful startup. Number 7, think big, start small. You really want to think big, sell the big idea, tell the world you're building the Starship enterprise, not some small rocket. This is really something I learned from moving to the US. People think bigger in the US. Coming from a smaller place, we have a tendency to think smaller. Not in the US, they think big. Always think big when you build a startup. However, don't start by building the Starship Enterprise when it's your first spacecraft. The reason why this is so important is because you just won't get it right the first time. Imagine if you start building the Starship Enterprise and you don't get it right. Not a great idea. So let me repeat that. You won't get it right the first time. Nobody ever does. This also means you should not build for scale. Yes, that's right. If you get 1 million users the first day, your servers will crash, and that's fine. We had that at Vivino. It's great. We got some press coverage out of it. When it comes to the first day, let me tell you a little secret. Nobody ever gets 1 million users the first day. It just never happens. Building for scale is a waste of resources. There'll be plenty of time to do that later. Any resource you use on building for scale are resources you take away from building what's important, the actual product. So don't build for scale. Starting small also means you have to say goodbye to perfection. Rather keep it simple, not perfect. A big challenge for a lot of founders is that they want to build perfect products. In the real world, that's really hard. As you might know already, I really believe in minimum viable product, build the smallest possible thing, and then figure out what really matters for the customer. I often hear the argument, I want to be like Apple. I want to build perfect, beautiful product just like Apple. That is true. They build amazing and beautiful products. They have the resources to do it. You don't. You're not Apple. Start small, then keep iterating until you get it right. Iterate, iterate, iterate. So always remember, think big, start small. Number 6, focus like crazy. This really isn't that complicated, but in practice, it can be hard to do. When you build a startup, you're always in a race. It could be a race against the competition. It's always a race against time because you might be running out of money. Either way, you need to find out what's really, really important and focus on that. Focus like crazy. This all sounds pretty easy. It's not, because you will be tempted, so stay focused. Let me give you 2 examples. You will be tempted by money. Someone comes to you and says, hey, I have 25,000. Could you do this consulting gig for me? This is not really what we should focus on, but if you're really willing to do the special version of the product, we get 25,000. Every time you do that, you lose to the competition. You do it too many times, you will lose the race. Your product just can't compete anymore. For Vivino, temptations came from different directions. At Vivino, we'd get a new business opportunity every single day. Every single day, someone would come to us and say, this is an amazing opportunity. You should do this right now. That's what happens when you have a high profile and millions of users. Most of these are easy to say no to. What do you do when the big companies start knocking on your door? Companies like Google, Samsung, and Amazon. Now it's a little bit harder to say no. For example, when Amazon decided to launch their own phone in 2014, the Amazon Fire, they called us and said, hey, we need some help with recognizing wine bottles, and you guys are the best at that. We ended up investing heavily in a partnership with Amazon, but the phone went nowhere and was taken off the market within months. The resources we poured into this partnership were resources we could have used to build a better product and then beat the competition. That's a problem. We should have stayed focused, but it's hard to say no to Amazon. When Amazon launched the phone, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos pitched the phone, including some of the features from Vivino. At least we got something out of it. We have Jeff Bezos pitching Vivino. I mean, that's something. My advice would be to only go for the best opportunities and the opportunities that are a win for both companies. And I mean both companies, otherwise they'll just cancel the project on the other side. Both companies need to win. So always focus like crazy. Sometimes you have to pivot, change direction. That's okay, but don't try and do too many things at the same time. Pivot and then focus everything on whatever the new thing is. Number 5, build a great founding team. In the early days of startup is basically the founders. There's nothing else. Some people do great alone, but generally startups with more than one founder do better. Doing a startup is hard and painful. Having someone there to support you and challenge you is really valuable and will increase your chance of success. Founders have a lot of different skills, and you need to make sure you have all the right skills needed for the founders to get the startup off the ground. If you do a tech startup, you certainly need some tech skills. Sometimes you need sales skills, and very often you need some domain knowledge. In Vivino's case, domain knowledge would mean wine knowledge, and we had none of that. That turned out to be an advantage, as our domain knowledge in wine was limited and thereby matched our target audience really well. We were building a product for the people that didn't know a lot about wine and needed help finding the right wine. Generally, you really need a team of diversified founders, people that have different skills. And if you do well there, maybe the founder can do around 90% of what needs to be done at the startup. This is where it's good to have multiple founders. I haven't met that many amazing engineers that are also great salespeople. Having both usually requires multiple people. This cannot be underestimated. Make sure you get the right founding team. Number 4, learn to operate and always be frugal. You're now running a business. A startup is a business. There's no way around that. Pitching an idea to an investor is very different from running a business. This is the real deal. This means you have to learn the basics of running a business. It's always best that one of the founders either knows how to operate a business or can and wants to learn it fast. If that's not possible, find someone, get them on board, get someone who knows how to run a business. I'm not saying it's very difficult, but you have to prioritize it and get it right. If the business doesn't operate well, nothing works and your startup will fail. You have to know your numbers and basic stuff has to be in order. Your team has to get paid every time on time. The other thing, you have to be frugal, especially in the early stages. The only thing you have to sell is equity in your company, shares in your company, and you can only sell that once. When you sell 1% of this company, it's never coming back. Never, ever. Now, the tricky thing is that the value of that 1% can change a lot. In the early days, not worth much. Later on, could be worth a lot. So be careful you don't sell too much of it early on. Actually, do everything you can not to spend too much equity in the early days. Let me give you a literal example of how much it can increase in a very short time. For 1% of Vino, when Vino was 1 year old, you could buy yourself a Chevrolet Trax. 2 years later, when Vino was 3 years old, the value had increased a lot. Actually, 2 years later, the exact same 1% would have gotten you a McLaren 720S. This is not about buying cars, but it's very much about how many resources you have to build your startup. So be frugal early on, so you don't have to buy too many Chevrolet Trax when you can get a McLaren later on. Number 3, learn to sell. I get it. A lot of founders don't like selling. They want to be founders, not salespeople. Here's a newsflash for you. Being a founder is a sales job. At least you'll be doing a lot of it. You will be selling all the time. That is your job. You're selling your startup to the world. Stop whining. You're selling your dream. This is not just about selling products to customers. This is about selling your startup to everyone. You'll be selling to investors. You'll be selling to new employees that have other great opportunities, but you have to convince them to take a chance on you. This may come as a surprise to you, but being a founder is about selling, convincing, and even evangelizing to the world that this is the best startup ever, and nobody has the faith in it like you do. So how do you actually do that? I think one of the most important things is actually realizing that it is a part of your job. Realizing that being a founder is very much about selling, being serious about it, learn from the mistakes, and always be well prepared for it. Selling is important. And when you meet people that are amazing at selling, pick up as much as you can. Honestly, I didn't meet a lot of founders that couldn't convince their surroundings that their startup was amazing. So if you can't do that, it's hard to succeed. But don't worry. You can learn it as long as you make it a priority. Number 2, don't get greedy. I'm not going to preach here. This is all for your own good. If you get too greedy, you often end up with nothing. I know plenty of people who should have been rich by now, but they got greedy and end up with nothing. Try not to be one of those people. Let me explain. Things go up and down in business, especially in startup. Yes, I've seen a lot in the past 30 years. I've seen 3 crazy cycles by now. In 2000, we had the dot-com crash. In 2008, we had the subprime. And in 2021, we had the pandemic hangover. If someone offers you a lot of money at the top of a cycle, take the money. When we raised a lot of money in 2021, we were growing, we were profitable, and I thought we could walk on water. I don't need to raise any money, we can just keep going. Guess what? The growth didn't keep coming. Business goes in cycles and there's always a downturn. Fortunately, we did take the money. If we hadn't taken the money in 2021, we'd be in all kinds of trouble, maybe even dead. The downturn would have come and we'd have no money to take us through. You get greedy on top of those bubbles, you can suddenly find yourself very poor. Don't get greedy. Number 1, keep pushing. Yes, keep pushing on all levels. Keep pushing on the product, improving the product, raising the bar, and keep pushing on all levels. It also means you have to keep going. The one thing all great founders have in common is stamina. The ability to keep pushing, never stop, never ever quit. Something I very often hear about successful startups is, oh, they were very early. They were not early. They just kept going. Never ever lose momentum. It's simple as that. Keep pushing. I'm sure you heard this before. Doing a startup is a marathon, not a sprint. This sometimes confuses people. They think they need to preserve energy because this is a marathon. Guess what? This is a marathon. You run like a sprint. You sprint all the way through. No preserving energy. This is why I love the expression, be short-term impatient and long-term patient. Yes, this is going to take some time, but it doesn't mean anything can wait. Things still need to happen right now. Great founders know they have to run this marathon like it's a sprint. Be short-term impatient and long-term patient. That's it for now. Now stop watching, go build something.